Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. And I'm joined by sweet Chauncey Kovacs from the internet.
Taylor Kitsch.
And of course, he's ugly, but he's beautiful, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and I have 4 arms.
You don't want to know what 2 of them are doing, but hey, at least that's 2 less arms than that dude in what you call it there, the Clone Wars, who got his arms just straight chopped off.
Oh,
Holy
yeah.
crap!
Spider-Man, not Spider-Man, but a Spider-Man.
A Spiderman.
That's a name.
This week, we are pointing our fingers directly at one Bruce Leslie here because we've decided to start placing blame on everybody for the stuff that we do. And at the end of the year, we're going to calculate stuff up as best we can and say who made the best choices. And that's the cool thing here, because we have the 3 of us and we have the Patreon votes. I didn't even think about this one until yesterday. Since we do have them, we can have them in a category as well, because not only do, if you go over to patreon.com/HMP, do you get the pre-show, post-show, and of course the Dinger Zone. And let me tell you something, kids, we are in the middle of just Mission Impossible mania over on the Dinger Zone. This week is number 4, and that one is Rogue Nation? No, or Ghost Protocol. Ghost Protocol.
There you go.
I always get those last couple going, which one is which again? I only know Fallout is the last one because it's the last one that I saw. But we're going through all of those over there. And these are full reviews. These aren't like 15-minute bullcrap things where we just go through. Most of these are about 45 minutes to an hour long. And
Yeah, I was going to say it's not 15-minute bullcrap. It's 45-minute bullcrap.
Yeah, exactly. We've stretched it out to a large degree for your love and entertainment. And do that over at patreon.com/HMP. We'd like to thank all of you that help support this show and keep us going low these many years. Boys, this week we're blaming all of everything on Bruce Leslie. Here is the trailer for John Carter.
When I saw you, I believed that something new can come into this world.
You are John Carter of Earth?
Yes, ma'am. What happened to this place?
A new power threatens to destroy our city.
That don't look like a fair fight. You are ugly, but you are beautiful. You will fight for us! Get on. We did not cause this, but this very night, we will end it! I was too late once. I won't be again.
Alrighty, that was the trailer for John Carter. Let's do this because he's got a lot of explaining to do. We got to get this thing rolling fast.
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
Bruce, John Carter is not only a man that I worked with in television for several years, he's also a comic book character?
Yes, he is. John Carter of Mars is a creation of Edgar Rice Burroughs. So you could kind of think of him as Tarzan's brother or cousin at the very least. But whereas Tarzan was raised in the jungle, Carter was raised in a much less pleasant environment. That's right, folks, Virginia. He first appeared in a story called The Princess of Mars that was released in serialized form in All Story magazine, the kind of magazine that used to exist, but has since been replaced by YouTube. John Carter is frequently cited as one of the prime examples of adventure pulp fiction, though our present-day perception of that genre has drifted more towards the noir stories. But back in 1912, when memories of the American Civil War were still somewhat fresh and World War I couldn't even be imagined, pulp fiction was made up of shirtless men having fantastic adventures, the sort of stories that were told a chapter at a time and undoubtedly would give rise to the old-time motion picture serials produced by companies like Republic. Before World War I, most people born in America hadn't seen much of the world beyond a day's ride from their own home, so stories that could whisk people away to exotic locales were often appreciated. But where do you go once you've already taken people to the jungle, the desert, and the furthest tropical isles imaginable? Well, to quote a dear friend of mine, you go to space. Now, War of the Worlds was published roughly 15 years before Princess of Mars, but I imagine Burroughs said to himself, he said, if those lousy Martians can come here and start trouble, who's to say we can't give it right back to them? So send it to him he did, in the form of a 6'2" Confederate cavalryman with close-cropped black hair and still gray eyes. He made alien women swoon and struck fear into the heart of his literally blue-blooded enemies. Now, you guys may not know this, but according to the Tarzan novel, the Jungle Man was immortal. Guess who else was immortal? That's right, John Carter, because when something works, you keep doing it until it doesn't. Right, guys?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know how Tarzan became immortal. He took pills because popping pills is good for you, kids. But I have no idea how John Carter became immortal. And something tells me Edgar Rice Burroughs isn't sure either. But we do know Carter became a gold prospector after the war, and he found something more valuable than gold. He found lots of gold and some magic portal to Mars or something. Honestly, if given the choice myself, I'd just stick to the gold. But after his passage to Mars, something strange happens. Whenever Carter dies on Mars, he goes back into his Earth body. And when he dies on Earth, he goes to his Martian body. Repeat ad infinitum. Now, John Carter's journey into comics wasn't as smooth as his trip to Mars. When King Features wanted a spaceman comic to compete with Buck Rogers, Burroughs tried to convince them Carter was their man. They were, after all, the publishers of the Tarzan comics. But King Features wisely chose to go with Flash Gordon instead, because rich polo players were far more connected to the American experience during the Depression than a broken-down former soldier hoping to escape poverty by some miracle. Now, in 1941, United Features agreed to the creation of a John Carter strip, hoping it would become as successful as Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. But guess what, guys? It didn't. Because this strip debuted on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, the very day of the Pearl Harbor attack. So for some reason, folks weren't too interested in the funny pages. This strip only lasted 4 months. But Dell Comics did release 3 issues of John Carter of Mars under its 4-color comics anthology title with what I think is some beautiful Golden Age art. Another John Carter of Mars ran in DC Comics Tarzan and Weird Worlds comics from 1972 to 1973. And again in Marvel Comics John Carter Warlord of Mars from 1977 to 1979, making him one of the rare characters who was not public domain yet appeared in the pages of both of the big two. Now, more recently, there was a Tarzan John Carter Warlords of Mars, a 1996 4-issue miniseries from Dark Horse. And in 2010, Dynamite Entertainment published an ongoing series titled Warlord of Mars, written by Arvid Nelson. In 2011, Warlord of Mars Deja Thoris #1 debuted, and there's still an ongoing Deja Thoris comic out there, and John Carter does pop up in that from time to time. But the most important appearance of John Carter in comics, in my humble opinion, is when he shows up in the pages of the 2nd volume of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen on Mars, fighting against the Martians from War of the Worlds. And, you know, it was written by that guy I like. Now, despite all the stories and adaptations and being a major influence on science fiction, fantasy tales, and characters through the 20th century, including Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, Superman, Adam Strange, Dune, and Star Wars, to name just a few, he has never achieved the name recognition of his fellow Burroughs creation Tarzan. Even the box office smash Avatar, which was inspired by John Carter of Mars, according to James Cameron, couldn't bring fame to the interplanetary adventurer. But in 2012, when Disney spent a lot of money on a movie they didn't call The Warlord of Mars or The Princess of Mars, but instead the oh-so-bland John Carter, well, when that happened, it did absolutely nothing to raise the poor guy's profile.
No, if anything, we've perhaps buried him even deeper at this point. Here's the IMDb plot line. Transported to Barassom, a Civil War vet discovers a barren planet seemingly inhabited by 12-foot-tall barbarians. Finding himself a prisoner to these creatures, he escapes only to encounter Woola and a princess in desperate need of a savior. This is directed by Andrew Stanton, starring Lynn Collins, Willem Dafoe, Samantha Morton, Thomas Hayden Church, Mark Strong, and of course, box office poison, Taylor Kitsch.
Taylor Kitsch.
For a long time, I used to think the guy just was catching bad breaks, that maybe he wasn't to be blamed just because the movies he was in were absolutely stupid. But after watching that, I'm starting to think maybe there's a reason that the movies he gets put in are stupid, because the people that make good movies, maybe they're avoiding him, because I wasn't seeing much charisma from that guy.
It's a little rough, but here's the thing. Given the right material, he can do fantastic, and everyone can view this material right now. It is on Netflix. It is the Waco series that was on FX. He's fantastic in that.
And you know what? I liked him in the maligned season 2 of True Detective. Not a great season, but I thought he was pretty good in it.
I never actually made
And
it
of course,
past that first
Friday
episode.
Night Lights, where
That was what I was going to ask you, Sean, because I know you were a big fan of that, and I know
Huge.
that was like his big thing coming into the world of Hollywood.
yeah, the role that he's custom suited for, unfortunately, is not a typical like stock character in America, but it is in Japan. Like if you watch Voltron or you watch any number of anime, the character that is not the main character, but he's the second in command guy who's like got a chip on his shoulder, and I'm someone who shouldn't be trusted. The only person that should trust me is the leader of the group, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where like he's like a wild card sort of thing. And Taylor Kitsch is custom suited to play that character, because when you make him scuzzy, he works better than when you clean him up. And he's great in Friday Night Lights because he is the scumbaggiest guy on the football team. And like his brother is raising him, and there's alcohol and there's drugs and there's a whole lot of underage sex and all this stuff. And he is great in that role. And he is a very, very handsome man. But for some reason, he is charisma disabled when you put him as the lead in anything. But if you put him at a lesser role, he's your man.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, because whenever he kind of steps into the foreground here and they're like, oh, no, he's going to be the star, it just doesn't work. And I think ultimately the kind of strength of this movie lives and dies by whoever's playing John Carter. And unfortunately, like it's so rough because he's got like the right look and everything. You feel like, but there is that magical X factor that is missing in him to where you just don't buy 100% what's going on for whatever reason, despite all the other things being there.
And it's not even like, for me, it's not even an acting thing, because there are people that are probably lesser actors, because, like Sean says, you see this guy in more character roles and he does a good job, but it's more like what you said there, Adam, with just like the presence or the charisma. I mean, there are bad actors that still kind of can carry an action movie with their personality, and Kitsch is better playing a character maybe than trying to just carry it on, the name on the marquee being the draw.
Yeah.
Right. You know what here's a good example. So watching John Carter the other night, because I didn't like this movie. I can't remember if I said this off air or on air last week, but I remembered hating this movie. And watching it a second time, I don't hate this movie at all. It's just not it's just not great. Like there's nothing to that you can hang your hat on and go, man, that's cool.
And a big reason I recommended this is because people said it didn't get a fair shake, that it was sunk by the name, that people think it's worse than it is. And if you think, if everybody says it's a 1-star movie, but it's really a 2.5-star movie, it's still not a good movie just because it's better than what people said.
Right. And here's one of the main problems with this movie is while I'm watching it the other night, Taylor Kitsch is your lead character in this movie. I can name 3 actors who, if they were the lead in this movie, instantly make it better.
That's what I was trying to do all throughout this, is go like, who would I replace here and make this a better movie?
Number 1 is Tom Hardy.
Good idea.
I thought that maybe, but that like he was kind of a secondary choice for me.
I say Tom Hardy if he does the same accent he did in Venom, whatever that was supposed to be.
Whatever that accent is.
Civil War.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I call that a Gerard Butler American accent that he was doing. Tom Hardy doing Gerard Butler doing American.
I'd watch that.
Well, Gerard Butler makes it worse, right? Because Gerard Butler isn't as good in this role as Taylor Kitsch is.
Even Gerard Butler circa 300, when at least from a physical standpoint he could have pulled this off, would not have been something about it wouldn't have been right. He would have been far more menacing. I'll at least say that.
I think that there are actors that make this better, but still I think the biggest flaw isn't even Kitsch, even though Kitsch is definitely not the kind of guy who's going to save this. I'm going to put some of the biggest flaws squarely on the writing and directing, a lot of which was done by the same guy.
Yes, so let's get into that. Andrew Stanton came from the world of animation, and actually when you look into the writing of this movie as well, these are also guys who came over from the world of Pixar. So what we've done here is we've allowed animation nerds, and I love you animation nerds, you are a very special group of people, but we let them into live action, and we're if you go to patreon.com/HearMoviePodcast, you'll hear us talking, coincidentally, hearing us talk about a guy who moved from Pixar to do live action, and it turned out spectacular. This, however, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's as if some people are good at more than one thing, and some people are really good at one thing. It's just the way the world goes.
But I think
the problem, the main problem with this is that there's nothing to hang your hat on, right? Like it feels like the thing that they do at Pixar, where they write the script, then they tear down the script and rewrite the script again. It feels like that never happened to this movie, and maybe it's because of the source material. Maybe Andrew Stanton's a little too close to the source material.
That's the idea I got, is that he was really, really close to the source material and was pretty much shrugging off all the notes he got.
Well, see, that's why I think between him and the writers, who again, all from Pixar and everything, these are guys who were predisposed to have like super, super love for this kind of thing, because those are the types of nerds that work over at Pixar, or nerds that would love this. And right. I think that is something that absolutely had a problem with this, is that they were just like, look, we're going to be so true to this, we're going to be so into it that, like, I'm sure that if you're a huge fan of this ahead of time, perhaps this is like, a fantastical, accomplishment for you. But for those of us, the majority of people out there who don't have a close one-to-one relationship with any kind of John Carter stuff, you need to kind of hold our hands a little bit more, because everything that's going on here feels like it's of a Lord of the Rings style epic thing going on, but they're not as good a storyteller as Peter Jackson was.
And I would even point to stuff that's more like technical competence on behalf of the director and his team than just the story itself. Put aside how the story is paced poorly, it really drags, so that by the time some interesting stuff happens, you kind of don't care anymore. But even when we're in the middle of a battle that should be giving us some awesome on-screen stuff, something akin to like what we would see in the big battles in Infinity War, or even some of the bigger Star Wars battles, but we're in the middle of a big battle and we're getting it from angles that just aren't fun. And this is the sort of thing I can forgive a whole lot of story if suddenly the big action, if this were a Mission Impossible movie, when we're in the middle of the big action scene, we're going to be filling that action scene. But here we're in the middle of large scale battles on the field, one point where it's supposed to be helpless and then he gets saved, and I'm just not feeling any of it. Part of that might be because this came out in 2012, and a lot of the stuff I'm comparing it to came afterwards. But there's just stuff that maybe from his Pixar background, he's not wanting to make it feel as visceral and as grown up as it could in some of those spots, or maybe it's just not something he's good at directing. And maybe, you know, I don't know what the technical differences are in live action and animation, but it shows on screen that when we do get to some stuff that should be able to win me over regardless, he's not even doing that.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at, like, say, Mission Impossible 3 that we covered last week on the Dinger Zone, patreon.com/HMP, when we talked about that, that is a movie that is ultimately based around these big, giant things, and there's a MacGuffin that literally means nothing in that entire story. It's nothing. Yeah. And yet we still are very compelled throughout the entire thing because he's put together, you know, these great action set pieces and enough of a cohesive story to get us from point A to point B, even if the trip in between, like from an emotional standpoint, doesn't really mean a whole lot because we're just chasing, you know, pixie dust.
Yeah, and one of the big battles, he's one man standing alone against just this whole horde of interesting looking Martian aliens, and he's cutting through them, and I really should be feeling some excitement there, but it's almost like the weirdest from above wide angle shot, so it's hard to appreciate. Like maybe he's trying to give us that Agent Smith versus Neo feel and not succeeding. But you know, in my mind, I'm comparing that to one specific battle that I won't tell too much about to spoil much, but there's one specific battle of Game of Thrones I'm immediately comparing that to, and it just doesn't capture the feel at all.
The problem is that there's no satisfaction, right? So John Carter, when he gets to Mars, is the strongest person on Mars, right? They do almost nothing to set that up that he's the strongest person on Mars. They have fun with him hopping around. They have some fun and games with that.
I like that. But I thought that was good storytelling kind of thing.
Yeah, and that part is fun.
Yeah.
But there's the other aspects to it too that they don't really hammer down. And so you don't have that moment. There's no setup for it. And then on top of that, when brute strength meets technical superiority, which is what happens when the three Baldies in the shimmering robes show up, there's no real showdown there. Where, yeah, you could be the strongest person. It doesn't matter. We're technologically superior, and we're going to cut you down. And so there's not that big moment where you're like, oh, man, John Carter just got it handed to him. Like, you don't really have that moment.
Yeah, and there's interesting stuff that goes on here. Like there is a good story here. And there is some things that could have been dealt with to make this a more interesting movie. But the first complaint I think I'm going to have is this is just too long for what they accomplish. And a lot of times, you know, maybe somebody who's watched it closely or is really familiar with the source material understands exactly what's happening. But like, there's a part like, why is she marrying that guy again? Why do they tell her she has to do that? Why doesn't she want to? Why are they going down a creek on Mars? I thought there wasn't any water on Mars. Like there's times when it's like in Lord of the Rings, they always have to go to do this, to do that, to do this, like following their checkpoints on their quest. Here, they're following the checkpoints, but I feel like I don't know what the checkpoints are. Like, I don't know what it is they're going towards. And sometimes they get there and move on to the next checkpoint without it being real clear that they did. Like they just move on.
Yeah, this is the writing's problem, and there's some directing things in here, but I think ultimately where you can put most of the onus on this movie really does come from the writing, because it's an exposition machine, but it's rather boring, and they're not very good at it. So you can't. It's tough for them to get across exactly what they're trying to say, and what they're saying isn't even, and even in that, what they're saying is not all that interesting to begin with.
And it's exposition. It's weird because it's like you said, boring stretches of exposition, but I feel like they don't adequately expose things. Like I feel like Stanton needed somebody who didn't know this story at all to say, I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, they're saying a lot without saying a single thing.
Up things, but it's like they're speaking. They're speaking around it, and I still don't understand what was accomplished with all that exposition. Then there'll be something a little bit more important that they almost fly right over. Like when the Therns come out and they start explaining some of what's actually going on here, I feel like they zip past a lot of that.
I'm going to blow you boys away here. I was watching this movie going, I would rather be reading this as a book.
Well,
Because
don't be careful on that. I haven't read this book, but I have read some Tarzan books, and just what you're used to as a reader has changed a lot since 1911. And the stuff that was printed in the pulp mags wasn't always the sort of stuff that had the most time spent on crafting it either. So yeah, the reading, I think the comic book's probably the elite form of this story.
yeah.
And here's the other thing too, is that I am a huge believer in the remember what brung you. And John Carter is responsible for so many different things. And for that, it should always be lauded. However, tastes change. I've watched probably, I'm guessing here, let's say 8 Laurel and Hardy shorts.
Yeah.
I've never watched a Laurel and Hardy ever and laughed so hard I thought I would never stop laughing. And but I do understand that a lot of things are born from Laurel and Hardy, and that's fine. But the time has passed because you stand on the shoulders of giants. And so that is kind of where it feels this way anyway. That's kind of where we are with John Carter now. Because as dissected as this thing has been, and everyone's taken every great idea that's ever come from John Carter and expounded on that's what we're used to. Like, that's our norm. So when you go backwards, it feels like, the car falls apart on Laurel and Hardy as they stop the car and when they get to their apartment. I'm sure in the 1920s that was absolutely hysterical. That doesn't even move the meter now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we are with John Carter. And I'm sure that you can update this IP to make it something great. But the problem is that now you're just using names. I mean, it's the thing that we constantly complained about with what's that dude's name who ruins every movie that he writes?
David Goyer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Goyer. So Goyer, have Goyer take a crack at this.
Honestly, Goyer would have made this a more entertaining thing, because as stupid and rudimentary as a lot of his stuff is, it does tend to be fun in most times, not all the time. Sometimes he drags us through the mud, but he gets enough of the idea of like, oh, okay, here's this and that. Now I'm going to add my own little twist to it. And this needed a twist like you wouldn't believe.
And also, you kind of got to go one way or the other with it. Like this is based on, we call it books, but really they were published. They were just like movie serials in written form. They were published a chapter at a time, but each chapter had to stand on its own. So when you get the book Princess of Mars, that's like the equivalent of getting a trade paperback of comics that were released as single issues, and also written in a way that if you only read this one chapter, you're going to be satisfied that you got some action, some adventure, that sort of thing. So what they need to do with this is lean into something. If you want to make it super like epic, then lean into it and give it a Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings kind of feel once he gets there and he's going on this quest to stop the Therns. And we have this huge thing in the balance because the Therns are going to move on to Earth after Mars, or throw a little comedy in it and it feels like Thor Ragnarok. And I'm thinking like Taika Waititi directs John Carter. We get sort of Thor Ragnarok with some of the names changed. We're going to get a much more.
That would have been very entertaining, I think, just to have something that's like this, that has this tone, but with a kind of like a wry wit about it that, it knows what it's doing.
Feels like to me is like there was a John Carter cartoon movie that did really well, and they made the live action adaptation where they want to say it's for grown-ups, but they also need to make sure all the kids that love the cartoon could come in and see it. I mean, this is like if they went straight to the live action Aladdin, but there was never the animated Aladdin.
Right.
This has this weird tone to it where it's like, yeah, it's actually, we actually need it to be appropriate for audiences who would go to a G-rated movie, but we need it to be PG-13 so that the teenagers will come and think they're getting something. And it's like they just went right too much down the middle for a movie that cost as much to make as this. Like they needed to give it something entertaining other than just the artwork is great and the landscape is great, but the action scenes aren't shot in what I consider to be a very compelling or exciting way. They seem to be shot in a pretty boring, bland, like been done a million times way.
Well, here's the thing too with this property, is that you mentioned Game of Thrones earlier. The one thing about Game of Thrones is that the first season, the only thing people talked about was that there's a brother and sister who are banging each other, and also they throw a kid out a window.
Yeah, that's all I remember.
That's literally how everyone described the first season. Describe for me, other than the really fast dog, describe for me something that you can tell people of, like, oh, hey, you should watch it for this.
You get like the most interesting part to me is Bryan Cranston, and he's like gone in an instant.
Oh man, I didn't know.
Yeah, he's on Earth during the Civil War, which is in this thing for 5 minutes.
he's in a segment that I, personally, even though it's one of the better parts of the movie, in terms of trying to make this a palatable movie, I think they should have cut a whole lot of the framing story, whole lot. Like, I don't know why they felt they really had to shoehorn in Edgar Rice Burroughs as a character in the movie.
Dude, I thought I thought this was gonna turn into the never-ending story.
Or it was going to be the way that, like, and then I wrote this down and made a book that you guys think is fiction. They didn't even do that. And they tried to put a really clever twist on the end. So I understand why they thought that framing story was going to work. But if you're going to try to, they have a framing story that goes to a framing story that goes to the story. Like, I think they could have at least just, Edgar Rice Burroughs shows up, starts reading the book. He reads immediately where John Carter's going into the cave and looking for gold. Like, they don't need all this weird stuff where we see him try to escape like 6 times and get hit without really moving the story forward. I guess it tells us about the kind of guy John
You don't
Carter
understand,
is.
Bruce. He's a scoundrel.
Yeah, you know what? I could have figured that out once he started cutting aliens down with swords.
He needs 4 times to escape and people to be smashing him in the face while he grows a long, scraggly beard. Otherwise, you don't know who he is.
And they're giving him a Saint of Killer's backstory with a
yes.
They're giving him seriously a Saint of Killer's backstory with just like a G-rated front story. What's the point?
You're absolutely, I never put that together, but it is absolutely the Saint of Killers, and it's not even remotely as good as what we saw in AMC. And like that just killed it.
I got it. Saint of Killer's backstory and not even an arse face front story. Like, man, just a squeaky clean front story.
Yeah, it's just,
So
I wish it was better.
And while we're talking about the movie's own BS, Bruce, hopefully you can describe for me what's happening here. So are there 2 John Carters? Is there one on Earth and then there's one on Mars?
Okay, so yes, there is, but that requires some meta knowledge. You know what I mean? Now, I want to expand on the very fact that you asked that question makes me feel better, because I didn't pour through this movie a couple of times, and I'm sitting here saying, well, I really feel like they're moving about randomly until interesting things happen. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
And I think somebody else is going to say, well, you're just too dumb to follow the story, which might be right. I'm not going to argue that I might be too dumb to follow the subtle story, but
everybody affiliated with this show knows that you're the smartest guy on the show. Please continue.
But I think you'll agree with this. You don't spend $350 million producing a movie that dumb people don't like.
That's true.
Unless you're dumb yourself.
I mean, it might sound harsh, but dumb people, 80% of your box office, maybe.
Dumb people be spending. we got 9 Fast and the Furious movies to prove that.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's ever said that it was a box office failure because they appealed too much to the lowest common denominator. It's usually like, yeah, it was a box office success, but it wasn't a good movie.
But I think part of that also comes, I mean, just saying that the lowest common denominator, it's like they didn't like, show off to that party, but at the same time too, they dumbed the name of this thing down so much, no one knows what this is. Like I said, John Carter was a news anchor that I worked with. He still works in Charlotte today. Lovely guy.
Let's not lose sight of the original thing here.
No, but that's my point.
Are there two John Carters?
Yes.
Yes.
Think of it as a fax machine. Okay, let's go to the world of Star Trek.
Okay.
Now, you understand the actual physics of how the transporter works, right, Adam?
I got a pretty good idea.
Well, essentially what the transporter beam does is it disintegrates you and then rebuilds a clone of you with all your memories and experiences in another place.
Yes.
That's how it works. It's not really moving you, just moving you, everything you have, to another place.
Your consciousness, all your molecules, and then reassembling them on the other side.
So this is doing that without destroying the original.
Okay.
But also there's a bit of magic to this. This is a genre that wasn't created by Edgar Rice Burroughs, but he gets the credit for popularizing it. It's called Sword and Planet, which is essentially a sword and sorcery movie that takes place on another planet. One of the key elements is there has to be a little magic involved. So the magic is like the soul, the spark goes to the new copy. But then when that new copy dies, it goes back to the old copy. And then when that old copy dies, it goes and reanimates the previous copy, and it just keeps jumping back and forth between the two bodies. So once you have that initial fax machine send your body somewhere else, then you have to quench that spark, and then it relights in the other place, and you basically travel back and forth by dying.
I see.
But yes, there are two John Carters once this happens.
Not
So he
quantum.
touches the amulet, and it basically makes another John Carter.
Yes, but it takes his spark of life, his soul, if you will, and puts it in the other one. So it's not like multiplicity.
Right.
It's like these are you're taking the driver out of one car and putting it into another identical car in a different place.
This movie could have used some Michael Keaton in it. I'm not going to lie to you.
Hey,
Man, who you telling?
they had enough people that you could tell they're spending money to get big name people and then using them poorly.
I will say this, before he even started speaking English, and I didn't look at anything on the IMDb before watching the movie, and I'm just like, Willem Dafoe. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
Like you could tell even in a language that is not English that's Willem Dafoe
Just
on the other
way
end of that
he
microphone.
talks. There's something very specific about the way Willem Dafoe talks.
and the first thing I thought was, man, he is not as good at this as Nick Nolte is, because I much prefer the Ugnaught or whatever he's called in Mandalorian.
Oh, I don't know.
He an Ugnaught.
He's good though. Like I at least they got somebody with enough gravity that, again, I recognized his voice even before he spoke English. So it at least gives me an idea of kind of who that is and what the status of that character would be, if that makes sense.
And then I see other actors that I love. Like, for example, I love Ciarán Hinds. I know he's not like a name you put on a marquee to sell tickets to the main public, but he's so good, in my opinion, that it bugs me that he's not in like every other scene. Like, he really needed to matter to the plot, which he kind of doesn't.
I want him to
Like,
get up
he's
to that
not
Ghost
good.
Rider 2 status. Wasn't he in that movie?
Maybe. I don't know, but I love the guy. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but I love the guy. He was a great Julius Caesar. And then also, you got Mark Strong, who, once again, big fan of Mark Strong. Don't know that he sells that many tickets per se, but you got Mark Strong. Why do you make him a shapeshifter so that every time his character is on screen, it's not Mark Strong playing that character?
Because Mark Strong costs money, but it doesn't matter. We have $200 million for this movie. Yeah, I don't understand how any of it works, to be honest.
Total cost was listed at $350 million.
Oh, Lordy.
They did not one, but two reshoots of the entire movie because Andrew Stanton was still learning how to to shoot live action.
You just want to smack them and be like, you've done this. Just put it into people. It's like, the storyboards that you got, match them up in the real world. You get enough talented technicians behind you. You should be okay. What's wrong with you? Why do you
Honestly,
need that?
though,
Why is it that hard?
I think at Pixar, you still block the scene and stuff. You shoot it, and then you alter the light and the angles afterwards. Like you're 3D rendering it. It doesn't really matter where your camera's placed at the beginning. You can move it as many times you want after it's animated. You can change the lighting in post a lot easier. I really think there was something too, like generally a person who maybe had never even been around a live action shoot who was trying to do it differently than what has worked for everybody else. What I read, here's a quote I read from Stanton. And, I wasn't there, didn't hear it, don't know if it's true or not, but I read that he said, this is Andrew Stanton, quote, "I said to my producers, is it just me, or do we actually know how to do this better than live action crews do?" Now, that's the end of the quote. And I think that tells me he's doing things totally different from like what you're supposed to do, but not in a good way, not in a revolutionary way.
Yeah, there's Jon Favreau who goes and says, we're making crazy new video walls and changing all this crap about production that you've never seen. And Andrew Stanton goes, what if we filmed it crappy?
It's sort of like you have to prove you know how to spell words before you can say I intentionally misspell them for artistic purposes. There's a difference in just being bad at spelling and then intentionally doing it.
I'll be honest with you. I've always been just maybe not intentionally bad at spelling, but just bad at spelling. It shows what you know.
Terrible at it.
Spelling
I'm terrible
teachers
at it, and I own up to it. But there's some people that they'll always say, "No, I'm trying to break all the rules." It's like, no, you never learn the rules.
I put a K in there when there's not one needed.
I put a K in the word water.
I'm a rebel.
So I had to look her up because the Princess of Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn Collins.
Yeah. I had no idea that she was in Wolverine, X-Men Origins.
Yeah, she played Silver Sable, I think.
Oh, really? Man,
I may be way off. I may be way off. Don't quote me on that.
I tried to get that movie out of my head as best I could.
She plays a character named Silver Fox. Her last name is Silver Fox.
That's it. Silver Fox, not Silver Sable. Sables and foxes are so much
I was
alike.
about to say, I didn't see her in a giant chrome hollow foil cover, so I didn't recognize.
Yeah, but I didn't really remember her from that either. I saw it like you did. I looked it up.
Let me throw this
because
I'm sorry.
I mean, she is gorgeous. This girl, like, just amazingly gorgeous. But I don't remember her in anything ever. And she has like over 50 credits, which means that she's either like Mystique and could just change the way she looks all the time, or she's so bad that like my brain just doesn't remember anything she's in.
You're not memorable enough to do it. She was fine. I thought she was good. I liked the at least how they shot her. She looks like she could handle herself, which is another thing that we always talk about, is just like having female characters that actually look like they could kick some butt, and she does. She carries herself really, really well, so you buy all of it. But watching it, and I'm going to throw this out here because there's been rumors of season 2 of Mandalorian having Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano. And obviously, we talked about the orange skin and stuff while we're over at Clone Wars 30 Questions. I think if they kind of go this route with the orange skin and everything, I think it could work.
Oh, I have no doubts. They haven't let me down yet at Mandalorian.
Yeah, so I was looking at this the whole time just going like, yeah, if they kind of go in this realm with the orange and the blue eyes and stuff, I could see Rosario Dawson pulling that off. I think it could work really well.
Yeah.
But back to Lynn Collins, I saw she was born in Texas, so she's doing a pretty good, like, whatever you want to call high Martian nobility accent. She doesn't sound like she's from Texas, but not quite from anywhere. Does a good job at that. I could get a vibe from her as being sort of like we said with Tyler Kitsch, maybe having a good career is like this supporting female role, but probably not going to be like your lead female role in a whole lot of other stuff like she is here.
She was good.
Yeah.
She was good, but I mean, again, it's not a character that's fleshed out as much as you would hope it to be, so therefore you don't really connect with her like you want to, but as far as what she's doing well.
And I would say it also kind of goes back to a little bit that whether or not it's fair, we have no one but ourselves as the ticket buyers to blame. But charisma makes more money at the box office than good acting a lot of times. And I think she's like a solid actor who could play any role, but she's not going to, she's like a nice female equivalent of Taylor Kitsch, maybe.
Yeah, get yourself a good paycheck and just, be a great Hollywood working actor. I think that's, in a weird way, we kind of put all the, big Hollywood stars up on these pedestals. And, we love those big Hollywood stars, but man, there's a lot of like great actors and character actors and stuff that really are kind of just the workhorses of Hollywood that like don't get nearly as much credit as they really deserve.
And like, I could see her really having a nice career on some premium cable historical fiction show. You know, like I said, Sear and Hines was a really good Julius Caesar. I could see her really being good in a multiple season period piece, but I don't know, you know, it once again, when it comes to the big screen, especially if you're in a popcorn movie, being a great actor doesn't always matter.
I certainly wouldn't have figured her out from being from Texas, though. If you would have said, if she'd have been like, oh, she's from Wales or something, I'd be like, oh yeah, of course, that sounds about right.
Well, I look at it like this, right? So Jackie Chan, no one believes that guy works for the military. You know what I mean? But you don't care.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, in how many movies was he supposed to be from the streets of Chicago or something like that?
Almost all of them, where it's just like, oh yes, this Austrian man who's clearly a United States citizen from birth.
And I don't remember what it was, but there was this TV show on for a few years where he played the governor of California, and that wasn't believable at all.
It was the best show that there ever was. You shut your mouth.
It was, the evening news.
You know what's crazy, though?
That was a better timeline than the one we're in currently.
But this movie was out in 2012, and I can't help but think back to 2009 and District 9 being an amazingly much better looking movie as far as like aliens being seen in like broad daylight. I thought I don't know, it was okay, but especially for the money that was spent, boy, it felt like it could have been better.
Well, here's the other thing with that movie too, is that because as an American, my American eyes looking at Johannesburg, that looked more alien to me than Mars does. And so there's something to be said for that.
Welcome to Mars, Utah, the San Fernando Valley Mars.
Yeah, this was shot in Utah, so yeah. At least the Martian landscape stuff was shot in Utah. Another thing I'll say too, I think that the CGI, the animation, the aliens, I think that it looks great. You know, I'm not going to say, I know you said that there was something about District 9 that worked better for you. And of course, that's an extremely small budget compared to this one. But also, the budget on this one probably got driven up by filming it 3 times. I'm no mathematician, but I would guess that roughly triples your production budget.
Time to triple down, boys. You always hear that one.
It does look good, and I do like that they give Willem Dafoe's character, they give all of his arms something to do. They were very good with that. You know, a lot of the time when there's characters with multiple arms, they just have multiple arms because. But they are being used all the time and quite cleverly, even.
It's not like the Michael Jackson down at the pier where they're all connected by one large thing and they just all move at the exact same time. They're all moving independently. And that was one of the things that we said in Clone Wars that worked really well was with, I forget the, whatever race he is or whatnot, but just having like these arms are doing this thing, the other arms are crossed and the other arms are behind you. So it's just having arm business, as I like to call it.
Trench, guys.
I forget.
Jeez. Sorry.
Here's the thing. After the Martez sisters, I kind of knocked out anything that was before then out of my brain.
And my personal favorite visual in the whole thing was that white ape, that blind white ape with the extra arms that they have to fight in the gladiator ring.
That was cool.
Yeah.
That was a very cool creature. And it could have been a very cool fight, but it just was kind of boring to me the way that it unfolded. And once again, I couldn't help but think when the Hulk and Thor are having their gladiator battle, how much more interesting and exciting that one is. But yeah, the creature itself, I really liked, and I wish, they would have maybe better maximized that opportunity for the benefit of my enjoyment.
The problem also is that there's a movie that's 20 years old that does it better than this movie does, which is Gladiator. The stuff in Gladiator, the arena fights in Gladiator, so much better than this one.
But in Gladiator, did he ever jump inside of a monster and jump out of it with crazy blue blood all over him? Sorry, that was awesome.
Well, it depends on your thoughts on Meg Ryan.
Oh.
Wow.
You're on blast, Meg Ryan. You've been warned.
But you do have to admit, Gladiator an already very good movie would have been a little bit better if he fought this white ape.
Oh my
instead of
gosh,
Monkey
are you
King.
kidding me? That movie goes up like 300% in my mind, and I already like that flick.
I like it, but I thought, man, this needs more multi-limbed blind white apes that are gigantic.
Holy smokes. You wanted to, man, you put Ridley Scott behind this film. Think about that even. Just put Ridley Scott on this movie. This movie all of a sudden becomes, 300% better.
Do you guys want to talk about what could have been? Because this movie was roughly 30 years getting made.
I remember, I don't know what research you've done, but I haven't done any, but I remember back in the day, there were tons and tons of talks about, at one point, Robert Rodriguez wanting to do this. And like you said, if it's 30 years, it's clearly before then. But I know at one point he was established to direct this.
Oh, yeah. We're going to. I have a couple of opportunities that I always look for, no matter what we're talking about. Number one, to mention Alan Moore. And number two,
we already
to blame something on Frank Miller. And in some ways, you can blame this movie on Frank Miller, but we're not to that point yet. Disney first got the rights to this in the 80s. And they wanted to have something that in their mind could kind of compete with Star Wars.
Right.
And they had tapped Tom Cruise, a person who I think would make a great John Carter. Even old Tom Cruise now would make a great John Carter.
He kind of would kill
better
it.
now, yeah.
Yeah, and they can pace a 2.5-hour movie properly if he works with his director.
Yeah.
But anyway, Disney wanted to make this. They tapped Tom Cruise for it. Got stuck in development a little bit. I don't know why that didn't get made, but the rights reverted back to Edgar Rice Burroughs' estate. Then in, I think it was 2004, somewhere around there, 2003, 2004, Paramount and Columbia actually had a bidding war to get these rights. Paramount won the bidding war. They tapped Robert Rodriguez to direct. I don't know who they had in mind for the lead character. That's probably easy to find, but I don't know what that is.
I don't remember them saying anybody, at least from my recollection. But
and then Robert Rodriguez quit the Screen Directors Guild, whatever. What's it called? Just the Directors Guild?
DGA.
Directors Guild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he quit the Directors Guild. So Paramount could not use him to direct this movie. And the reason, of course, that he quit the Directors Guild was in order to to give Frank Miller co-credit as director, which then led to Frank Miller doing this version of The Spirit. I hope we get to watch someday. That'll be another one you can hang on my neck.
Woo!
And because they couldn't make the movie, they let the rights revert, and then Disney buys it again, and then we get this thing.
Here's the thing, though. I will say this, I thought it at the time, and I still think it today. I thought that was a stand-up move for Robert Rodriguez. Saying, "Look, I'm gonna step back. I'm not gonna take, you're gonna get me out of the guild, however it went down." But him kind of standing up so Frank Miller could also kind of get credit. I thought that was cool, even despite it leading to all those bad things.
I guess. Also, I don't understand the Directors Guild rules either.
Neither do
because
I.
I feel like I've seen other movies with two directors.
You have the
like
Russo brothers.
Yeah. And the Wachowski siblings.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what the deal was. I don't know. I'm sitting here just starting to say I think when I really have nothing to think.
I sometimes think. You never know. Overall, the action, like you said, it was kind of forgettable, but there's enough. I think the idea of it being as bad as it was maybe made me enjoy this a little bit more than I necessarily would have, but yeah.
So am I right in thinking that of the three of us, literally none of us have encountered John Carter before this movie?
No.
No, I mean I knew who the character was, but no.
Right. But you never read a book or saw an old show or anything like that.
It was literally just
definitely.
the name for me was about all the recognition. I was like, oh, that's a thing, and it has some sort of prestige to it, but nothing that I ever investigated. No.
Yeah, I mean I probably flipped through comics, but I never picked up a John Carter comic on the regular or anything.
When you saw him in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, did you immediately get the reference?
Yeah, because I think they call him John Carter.
Okay.
So once again, you guys shouldn't probably get this idea, but I mean, I know lots. I won't say I know lots, but I know at least a little about stuff even if it's stuff I've never actually read or watched, but I just kind of
Sure.
like collect nuggets of knowledge so I can at least be conversant in a lot of different things.
That's why I'm
So
halfway
John-
decent at Jeopardy, because I know a little bit about a lot of things. Not a lot about it, a little, just a little bit about a lot.
So I would have known about John Carter because I knew Tarzan was by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I wanted to know what else he wrote. He also wrote something called Carson Napier Goes to Venus, which is basically just John Carter with the name and planet changed. But yeah, so I got the reference. And also because it was there, I thought that maybe it was public domain, which it isn't or wasn't. But yeah, I got the reference, but that's about it.
I see. Because the reason why I ask is because this seems like one of those things where no one had really, no nerdy nerd. I mean, you have to be so steeped in lore to read it.
Yeah.
And no nerdy nerd, because there's enough to read already. Like, is going to seek it out and start reading this stuff.
And it never had a big TV show in the 50s. It never had like a
Right.
campy movie in the 70s. Like even though a lot of people know exactly who Flash Gordon is, I think a lot of that credit goes to that 1979 movie,
Right.
if that movie, or even the old Buster Crabs serials. But if all you had was the original Flash Gordon comic strip, and then you had somebody talking about Flash Gordon now, then he kind of gets relegated to like the Phantom or Mandrake the Magician.
Mm-hmm.
And I think John Carter is kind of on that level of the Phantom or even more Mandrake, because, even the Phantom had a couple of corny movies and a cartoon.
Well, that's what I'm about to bring up here, is that my introduction to Flash Gordon was not the 1979 movie. It was Defenders of the Earth.
Yeah. One of the okayest cartoons of 1985. Yeah.
Oh, it's awful. I mean, it's
One of the
just awful.
okayest.
Yeah.
Ringing endorsement.
I mean, but we're at a time where there's like Captain Planet and Defenders of the Earth, and there's nothing great on TV, and everything sucks. And given the choice between Captain Planet or Defenders of the Earth, I'm watching Defenders of the Earth.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get you there. Like, I'm considering Defenders of the Earth a treat because it only had about 12 episodes, and it was the syndicated thing that wasn't in regular rotation on any single channel where I grew up. So it was almost random to catch it.
But Captain
So that
Planet
made it a
had
little
that jam though, man. Woo, that song was killer. There's a lot to write on that song.
For some reason, not for some reason, I think a pretty obvious reason, but Captain Planet felt like a cartoon they show you at school to make sure you brush your teeth.
Oh, it's 100% that.
absolutely
It
is.
is. It is unequivocally the worst example of something that they would bring to you in school, but they fooled us somehow into watching it on Saturdays or weekdays or whenever the heck it was. It felt like we got to the end. Oh man, did we just learn a lesson? God, I thought we were supposed to be having fun here. What is this?
And it was that worst kind. It was like that worst kind of 80s cartoon with a message where a bunch of people got together and said, you know what we need right now, and we'll debut it on Earth Day, is a cartoon about environmentalism that's entirely written, produced, acted, made 100% by people who know nothing about like the environment in a positive way. Like, it's just like, what do we tell them to, like, hug the world or something? I mean, it's really like Buffy the Vampire Slayer high school.
What we
hug the
really
world
need here
thing.
is an animated monkey. Can you put an animated monkey in this? By God, we have something to sell children.
I disagree, because I think that the two people I know who know most about climate change and recycling is Ralph Nader, one, and two, Whoopi Goldberg. So
Yeah, man. So this movie, the title, I think people all agree that the title's a debacle, right?
If you would have just called it John Carter of Mars, at least there's something people go, oh, it's science fiction.
Well, but Adam, I mean, you do understand that every single movie that had the title Mars in it for the last 30 years has just been an utter catastrophic failure, right?
But I don't think the title's the reason. That's the thing.
It's not, but I mean, that's why they don't put it in there. Is because it's thought of as bad luck. Putting the word Mars is like putting, like for a long time it was die. If you put die in your title, or dead in your title, no one would come and see your movie, was the thought.
Sort
It's
of
not
like
true.
nowadays-
It's because every movie
Yeah.
was terrible that had that word in it.
And,
But
and
that's what.
nowadays, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
But I mean, that's why they took out the of Mars, is because there have been. Remember when there was like 4 different Mars movies?
Yeah, one of them's by Brian De
in the
Palma.
early
It's great.
2000s?
It's not great, but it's,
Say
it's
what?
one of them's directed by Brian De Palma, and it's pretty good for comparatively to the other Mars movie that came out at the exact same time.
Which one are you talking about?
He did Mission to Mars, I believe. Brian De Palma.
I think here's the problem. If you're a science fiction fan, particularly, let's say, post 1980, I'm kind of picking an arbitrary year, but if you're a science fiction fan and you hear Mars, you immediately think 1950s style science fiction because they're
Yes.
always going to Mars and stuff. But once you get past 1980, it's either planets so distant that you don't know if they even really exist or not unless you look it up on Wikipedia, or it's like Star Wars style or Star Trek style where they're just totally fake planets. And, you know, bringing that fantasy element in works a little bit better for a lot of stuff post 1980. I think now we're getting some hard sci-fi people that are rolling back with things like The Expanse, where it's okay to make Mars part of your story again. But for the longest time, you hear Mars, you're going straight to like, that movie where the guy had a gorilla suit and an astronaut helmet, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I was right. Mission to Mars, 2000. You got your John Cheadles, your Gary Sinise.
Specifically, it was Mars Needs Moms from 2011 that Disney had. You know, a year before this comes out, Disney loses a ton of money on a movie called Mars Needs Moms. And once again, you know, how are movies with moms in the title doing? Like I don't know that you blame that movie's success or failure on the title.
Exactly. That trailer stunk. There's no, and the title is terrible, so there's no way anybody's going to see that. Mars has nothing to do with it. You put moms in the title, it's just like, oh, we're gonna get moms and dads because moms go to movies with moms in it, dads go to movies
Adam,
with moms in it.
Look, I'm not in this belief system that because you have Mars in your title means it's a bad movie, but you do understand why they're going to, like, people are superstitious.
Then let's call it John Carter of Barasam.
Yeah, Barsoom. That's for once I'm the one who knows how to pronounce something. Barsoom.
No, that's the French pronunciation. You know what you're talking about.
But honestly, if I were the guy and my one job was to pick a title better than John Carter, I'm not saying I'm picking the best possible title, but if they say we need a title better than just simply John Carter, I tell them Warlord of Barsoom. You're going to get some opening day tickets just on that title.
That's a good title.
It's not going to hold up. It's not going to be selling like hotcakes on Saturday once they've seen it. But it'll help your Friday ticket sales if you call it Warlord of Barsoom.
I think this thing made like $78 million in the U.S. and like 200 and something worldwide. I mean, this was a bomb. So, you know, and it feels like they are trying to set this up as a kind of series thing. And I'm sure they hope that it would have been. But
can we talk about that for a second? Because I was thinking about that watching this movie. Right? They totally were trying to set this up to be a franchise. And I was trying to think of all the one-off movies where they're clearly trying to set up, you know, the guys at the Weekly Planet always call it the game is afoot, where clearly you're trying to set up an entire franchise here. And this movie clearly has that. And I'm trying to think of, because there were a lot of these movies around this time where they just did so much world building where of course they were going to try to make multiples of this, like Leaper and
Green Lantern.
I Am Number 4.
Yeah.
And like, you know, all of these movies where they just had so, like, you clearly are trying to build up a world here. And this is yet another one. Can you guys think of other movies where they tried to do that during this time?
Almost, I mean, any movie that's adapted from a book series. Now, trying to think specifically, like I said, my mind mainly goes back to Green Lantern because it also has Mark Strong in it.
Right.
But like more recently, there was like The Darkest Minds or something. Like I've seen several of these that came out after Twilight, which Twilight's before John Carter. So my years run together. But after Twilight, a lot of YA paranormal romance style book series, they were adapting the first one into a movie. And, the Hunger Games caught on too. So they did more and more of that, but a lot of them either just crumbled or had like sequels that got made for a cable channel or Netflix.
And the
or something.
Divergent movies did well enough. And then after that, it was just like every YA book decided like, yo, we got to have a movie, man. And they all descended on that. And by that time, which was about this time, everybody was kind of over it. We were just like, all right, that's enough of that nonsense.
Well, maybe they weren't. I mean, the books still did really well. The books still do well to this day, but it's like the thing that what does well in books isn't always what does well in a movie. And there's a lot of what made that movie work is that there was nothing else like that out there. Whereas suddenly, if there's more than one of them out there, nobody watches enough of either for either to be successful.
Yeah, those are nerd
I'm trying to remember the name of that movie that I watched like maybe 2-3 years ago. I saw it in the movie theater because my buddy was like, I want to watch the worst movie I've ever seen in a movie theater.
Mortal Engines. Was it Mortal Engines?
Mortal Engines. Thank you. Yeah, that's the movie.
Exactly what I'm talking about. The YA kind of dystopian paranormal, but basically a young adult book series that they tried to make into a successful movie series.
So much money thrown into that movie. Woo!
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of movie I'm talking about. And if you start to go like look through movies that have been released in the last, let's say 10 years, and you cross-reference them to whether or not books exist with that name, you're going to find out there are more Mortal Engines out there than you realize. They just didn't all have Mortal Engines budgets.
Or, big enough cast members or crew members to actually make somebody sit up and pay attention. They were just like, that's going direct to video. Speaking of direct to video, you'd never catch this man in a direct to video thing because it's absolutely it's unheard of. But we do have to find out how this movie relates back 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, man. Thanks, Adam. I have a prepared statement. I don't know what it is about the Stallone connection, but it goes in cycles. There was a time where for like 3 months, the Stallone connection was Get Carter. Every week, Get Carter. And here's the truth. Unless you're the host of a podcast where each week you review terrible movies, you haven't seen Get Carter. And if you think it's difficult coming up with something interesting to say when you're talking about the same dude every week, try coming up with something when not only is it the same dude, but the same movie. I believe I used the term ironic black hole more than a few times. So it's in this spirit that I present to you this week's Stallone connection, Daryl Sabara. He plays Edgar Rice Burroughs in this week's pick, John Carter. He's also most famous for playing Junie Cortez in the Spy Kids movies. And you know who's also in Spy Kids 3D? That's right. World's hottest mom, Carla Gugino, but also Sylvester Stallone. We've talked about Stallone's time on Spy Kids so often, I'm not going to bring it up here. And instead, I'm going to talk about something that goes totally under the radar about Daryl Sabara. And that's the fact that he worked on both the Uncanny Valley films known as The Polar Express and A Christmas Carol. The dead eyes, the motion capture, the absolutely creepy nature of both movies. They're like horror movies, but for kids, set against the backdrop of Christmas. But not just normal, regular Christmas, no, because that'd be too relatable and something that could hold your small child's attention. No. They go for a train that exports Santas from the North Pole, I think. I can't remember because I only watched it once a dozen years ago, and my kids were horrified by it. Why does his face look like that, they would ask. Why does this movie make me feel weird, they would ask. What is reality, they would ask. My kids would ask very difficult questions, and that's just with Polar Express. And not learning my lesson when we watched Christmas Carol, where I would have to feel questions like, why is that boy happy that he only got an orange for Christmas? And what is the difference between a regular goose and a Christmas goose? And why does this movie make me think about my own eventual death? Questions any kid has when faced with unexpected horror. And I do have a point here. I think everyone needs to thank both of these movies for existing, because without them, filmmakers wouldn't have figured out that you needed to pull some real world elements into your movie to give them a basis in reality. Because what if those two movies were great? What if they were really, really great movies? We'd be getting movies that are just like Rogue One Princess Leia going on adventures with that one scene from The Scorpion King. We wouldn't have Baby Yoda, or as I like to call him, Chicky Nuggies, if it weren't for those two movies showing everyone what not to do. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is, without Daryl Sabara's work during the dark days of CGI, we don't have Chicky Nuggies. Daryl Sabara is partially responsible for how cute Baby Yoda is. And we owe it all to the fact that as a child, he was familiar with acting using motion capture. And one of those movies was Spy Kids 3D, which also starred Sylvester Stallone. And there you have it, HMPers. This week's Stallone connection is Daryl Sabara. And on behalf of nerdy nerds everywhere, I want to say thank you, Daryl Sabara. Thank you. I'm Sweet Shanzi. You're welcome, podcast listeners. You're welcome.
First of all, absolutely. I mean, so good. So good.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Well, we're down to it, boys and girls. It's time to review this bad boy, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, we don't do regular ratings like everybody else. No. We have our own patented Robin rating system. Now, what in the heck does that consist of, Adam? You might ask yourself. Well, it's easy to figure all that out. Head on over to facebook.com/HeroMoviePodcast. It's right there at the top of the screen. Give us a like while you're there. Why don't you? Bruce, this is your choice here, so all of these grades will be falling on your head. Where does John Carter fall in the H&P Robin rating system for you?
Is it Antonio Sabato Jr.? Did I get that name right?
Yeah.
That is incorrect, sir.
What is it?
It's Daryl Sabara.
No, I'm talking about a different guy. Isn't there an actor called like Antonio Sabato Jr.?
Yeah.
Anthony Sabato
Oh, yeah.
Jr.? Yeah, he played John Carter in a movie called Princess of Mars that was produced by Asylum a couple of years before this one.
Oh, Lordy.
And, yeah, and Deja Thoris was played by up-and-coming actress named Tracy Lords. And
Wait a minute. Wait, can we put this on the H&P?
yeah,
Talk about that lady from the movie Crybaby?
Yes, Tracy Lords, same one. She's also from some movies I hope you haven't seen, Sean. I
don't know what you mean.
I kind of wonder if, unironically, that movie might not be more enjoyable than this one. This movie has beautiful things on screen, but it's not a painting. It's a moving picture, so that just doesn't do enough for me. This goes down low. Honestly, it's hard for me to find anything that's redeeming unless there's some kind of like super 80-minute cut out there. I might have a little fun watching that, but I've got to go Jason Todd on this one, which stinks because I want to.
Wow.
Yeah, I've also heard people tell me that the Lone Ranger movie isn't as bad as everybody made it out to be. And if you sit through the slow parts, it actually has a very exciting ending. Those are the same people that told me this was good if you sit through the slow parts. So now I'm totally not interested in watching that Army Hammer Lone Ranger
I don't
movie.
know who to believe.
Yeah.
Sean, what do you got?
I remembered hating this movie because I saw it when it first came out the VOD. I don't hate this movie. It's not great. It's not bad, but you know, it's like what Adam always says.
Yes.
The worst thing you can do is make a movie that's mediocre.
I
not a
am
movie that's
glad
bad.
that people are finally coming around.
Man, Adam constantly is saying that. So, I don't hate the movie though. Like it was something where I was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. You know, like there's a couple of things in this movie where you're like, oh man, that's cool. I'm gonna give it like a very, very low Damian Wayne. Like I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but if it's on TV or whatever, or it's already on, like it's not going to offend you. It's just boring.
Yeah, if you got to kill 2 hours, 12 minutes, on a Sunday or something, maybe you could do worse, but, you certainly could do better. But I kind of feel the same way. I'm in a Damian Wayne here. It's right in the middle. I feel this was my first time watching it, but I feel like I couldn't do it very regularly, but I feel like subsequent viewings, I may understand the story a little bit more or may catch more of the kind of hey, we're calling this thing that thing, and the spirit of Gaia this or whatever. It's all kinds of hokey mumbo
That's
jumbo
a great
bull
way of
crap.
putting it, Adam. That is really what it's like.
It is. There's a whole bunch of that crap in here, and like if you can, I think like subsequent watchings would make that a lot clearer as you were going through. So it's kind of like reading a book the second time, and you're like, oh, well, now I'm picking up things that I didn't see before, and that's what I think this could potentially be. It's not terrible, but yeah, it's tough to go out and truly recommend that people watch this. It's on Disney Plus right now for anybody that wants to check it out. But I don't know why you would.
It's no Mission
You know what? I put
Impossible
this in the
2.
same realm as, and it's a movie that I like considerably more than this. But the movie Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Which I can't believe. And again, in 7 years, we haven't covered that movie. We put it up for vote, but never really, never got there.
Because that movie is a very good movie. It's better than this is, quite honestly. But there's something about that movie that is not. It's never going to be anyone's favorite movie. There's never anyone who's going to be like clamoring for more Sky Captains.
I don't know. I have a weird, this is kind of a theory I've always had, is that no matter what it is, even if it's something like Sky Captain or just, something that makes Sky Captain look like Lord of the Rings, there's some weirdo out there that is just like that uber fan that is just going.
Of course, Adam.
Because that's
there's going to be
sicko.
fans for any sort of pop culture. I mean, I know a guy who loves The Blob.
The 50s one or the like 70s?
No, the X-Men
X-Men.
villain.
Yeah, one of the greatest mutants ever.
The Blob.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Best part of X-Men Origins Wolverine.
What can I say?
I won't disagree with that. You're right.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds talked during it, and until they, sewed his mouth shut, he was okay. He was like, honestly, he was kind of like that in that movie, what he was in Blade. He was just kind of like the guy that goes, he almost makes this, palatable, and then they go and
Same guy
screwed
that's
up
also
everything.
in Two Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place, and the guy that's in Blade, and the guy that's Deadpool, and it's kind of weird.
It's what he
Once
does.
his mouth was sewn shut, he became the guy from Accident Man.
Not so hot. So I think we're gonna put this one in the Bruce Not So Good category. But next week we've got Sean's taking the reins here. What do we got next week, Sean?
Next week is a movie I've always wanted to see. I've heard it's terrible, unfortunately, which means 2 bad ones in a row, probably. But it is popularly known as Russian Avengers, and it's a movie called Guardians, and it's a Russian film about Russian superheroes saving the world. And we're watching it on that streaming service known as Tubi, or as Bruce calls it,
Tubby.
Tubby. And you can watch it for free. So we are watching this movie next week called Guardians. I don't know if it's a dub. I don't know if it is something with subtitles. I have no idea. But I'm excited to watch it because I'm sure there's going to be moments where we're like, "Oh my god!" And that's why we have this podcast.
One of the best trailers ever. I mean, I'm all for it.
Good.
I think I remember seeing like 4 seconds of a trailer, and it was just like, all right, we'll watch that. So
Okay, good.
We'll be checking out Guardians, available on Tubby, wherever you find Tubby.
Tubby.
I can't get over it.
TUBI.
Until then, so we got Sean up next week, and then of course after that it's the Patreon people. So if you'd like to vote on what we watch on the fourth week of the month, I can't talk today. Head on over to patreon.com/HMP, pre-show, post-show, and of course, like I said, we're in the middle of our Mission Impossible marathon over there in the Dinger Zone, so do check that out. And in the meantime, though, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
I got 3 words you're going to like to hear here, Adam. Ready? Bride of Boogity.
Oh.
Bride of Boogity made it to Disney Plus on May 1st, so Chris and I wasted no time watching it, then talking about it over on Chubby Wizard.
I
of
need
course,
to
Adam, You were with us when we did Mr. Boogedy, and people loved that podcast so much. Disney Plus knew they needed to hop on the train and put Bride of Boogedy up as soon as possible. So we covered it.
That's exciting, and I want to see.
We call the heroes and villains bump.
No kidding. I want to see that, man, because I feel like what we watched back in the day was probably both of those back to back on the same VHS tape. If I was to venture a guess, so I'm well, yeah, I know what I'm doing this week. Sean, what are you doing this week, and where can people find other stuff?
We finished it out, but I am awfully proud of our redheaded stepchild known as Clone Wars 30 Questions. And if I know that we say this every week, but if you love The Mandalorian and you're a little disappointed in Rise of Skywalker like I was, you absolutely should watch the last 4 episodes of Clone Wars. If you're looking for something to watch and you have Disney Plus, do yourself the favor of watching the last 4 episodes of Clone Wars Season 7.
Yeah, and checking out our show following that, because we have a lot of fun times with it, and it honestly, it will make you appreciate the prequels more. And it sounds insane, but you'll go back and you'll, at the same time though, I caught a little bit of one of the prequels the other day, and it was just like, okay, yeah, now I can kind of read a little bit more into this, having known some Clone Wars stuff. This is gonna be. I'm not gonna make it through the rest of this. Okay, well, let's keep moving on. I was just like, man, the animated characters are dead, lifeless ones and zeros. Better actors than people that we know are, some of them Academy Award nominated and winning actors, and these things are doing better than them. So do check out those last 4 episodes of Clone Wars Season 7, and of course, check out the Film Find over at the Film Find, wherever you find finer podcasts. That is it, everybody. Join us next week when we're talking Russian Avengers, a.k.a. Guardians. For Sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet, Bruce Leslie, my name's Adam Portrais, reminding you to go to space.
Nice. Bye, Marty and Evie.